She looked me in the eyes and said, "I did it for both of us, but how do you ever forgive the one who sold you?" When I was 10, I thought my mother was sending me away to a better life, a family with money, a chance to go to school. But the truth was far darker. I wasn't being adopted. I was being sold, locked behind fancy gates. I was told what to do, when to eat, and who I could talk to, which was no one. For decades, I lived with a question that haunted every quiet moment. Was I just a price tag to her? Until one day, by pure accident, I saw her again, dressed in pearls, speaking at a charity gala, pretending to be a woman of integrity. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't run. I wouldn't hide. I would uncover the truth, no matter how deep it was buried. And the truth, it was uglier than I ever imagined. But justice. Justice was beautiful. Before we begin, if life has ever handed you a betrayal you thought you wouldn't survive, subscribe to this channel. You never know which story might help you find strength on your darkest day. Now, let me tell you what really happened, and why I stood face to face with the woman who sold me. Not to forgive her, but to finally be free. I used to think my mother's hands were magic. They could fix a tear in my dress with 3 stitches and a kiss on the forehead. They could make soup from nothing and somehow always make it taste like home. But the day she let go of my hand, that magic disappeared forever. We lived in a rusted trailer on the edge of town, where the roof leaked when it rained, and the wind whistled through the walls like it was looking for a way inside. I was 10. Old enough to know we were poor, but young enough to believe that love made up for it. My mother, Doris, worked nights at a diner and days cleaning houses. But what I didn't know was that the money she brought home didn't just disappear on rent and groceries. It vanished into smoke-filled back rooms, poker tables, and whispered promises of one big win. And when that win never came, she found another way out. It was a Thursday. I remember because I didn't have school, and she brushed my hair with extra care. She packed a small suitcase, just my Sunday dress, a pair of shoes, and the stuffed rabbit I slept with every night. "We're going for a little trip," she said, tying my shoes. I thought it was a vacation. We took a bus to the city. She held my hand tighter than usual, and every time I looked up at her, she smiled like it hurt. When we arrived at the big white house with a garden full of roses, I gasped. "Do we live here now?" I asked. She knelt down, smoothed my collar, and kissed my forehead. "No, sweetheart, you do." I didn't understand. I was just a child. She walked me to the door, and a tall woman in a gray dress opened it. She looked like the kind of lady who didn't smile often. My mother handed her the suitcase. Then she took out an envelope thick and heavy and passed it to the woman. They didn't speak. I remember grabbing my mother's arm. "I don't want to stay here without you." She didn't look at me, just placed my hand in the woman's hand, turned around, and walked away. That moment, it didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like a hole tearing open in the world, swallowing everything warm and safe. I screamed. I begged. I chased her down the walkway barefoot, crying until my throat burned, but she never turned back. The woman dragged me inside and locked the door behind us. She said I should be grateful. I would have food, a bed, clothes, nicer than anything I'd ever owned, but I want my mom. I sobbed. She smiled like she'd heard it 100 times before. That's not my problem. That night I cried into my stuffed rabbit, rocking back and forth in a room that smelled like polish and silence. No one tucked me in. No one said goodnight. Just me and the echo of the door slamming shut years later. I'd try to explain that feeling to a therapist, and all I could say was, it felt like being returned without a receipt. But even in that dark place, life has a strange way of giving you glimpses of light. There was a gardener named Henry. He was old, grumpy, and smelled like onions. He once caught me sneaking cookies from the kitchen and said, "Kid, if you're gonna steal, at least do it right. That's the raisin batch." I giggled for the first time in weeks. That man, with his dirt-stained gloves and tired eyes, became the first person who looked at me and didn't see a burden. Sometimes he'd sneak me apples from the orchard and tell me stories about plants that only bloom once every 10 years. I asked him once, why bother waiting so long? He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Because some things, they're worth it." I didn't know it then, but Henry would be the reason I survived. Not just the home, but the silence. The not knowing, the feeling of being unwanted. And in his own awkward way, he was trying to tell me that my life wasn't over. It was just taking longer to bloom. I was only 12 when I first arrived at the Thompsons' mansion. At first glance, it looked like a fairy tale. Grand pillars, blooming gardens, even a pond with swans. But behind the golden gates, something felt wrong. Mrs. Thompson greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome, Emily. You're going to love it here." She smelled like expensive perfume and disappointment. That night, I slept in a room larger than the entire apartment. My mom and I used to share, But even in that big, soft bed, I couldn't sleep. My heart ached. Where was Mom now? Was she thinking about me? Was she crying like I was? The next morning, I met Mr. Thompson. He was cold, barely looked at me, just nodded and said, "Rules." "Our rules? What rules?" I soon found out. Every morning began at 6 a.m. sharp. I had to wear a uniform, eat in silence, and study classical music and etiquette like I was some kind of royal project. At first, I tried to be polite. I thought maybe, if I behaved, they'd treat me like family, but that never came. I wasn't a daughter. I was an investment. They showed me off at charity galas and dinners, parading me like some polished little doll. People would say, "Oh, what a lovely young lady. She must be so grateful to have been adopted." I'd smile, nod, die a little. Inside. One night, I overheard a conversation. "She better score high on that test next week," Mr. Thompson muttered. "We didn't spend all that money for nothing," Mrs. Thompson replied. "If she doesn't, we can always send her back. She's just a write-off anyway. Send me back." My heart dropped. I wasn't a child to them. I was a receipt. Still, I tried. I studied harder, ate every meal in silence, smiled wider. Then came a moment I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday. Rain was tapping on the windows. I asked Mrs. Thompson if I could call my mom just to hear her voice. Just once. She paused, looked at me, then gave a cold smile. "Oh, sweetheart. You really think she wants to hear from you?" That hit me harder than a slap. I ran to the garden and sobbed under the old oak tree. My heart was heavy, but I still clung to one hope. Maybe, just maybe. My mom missed me too, but something strange began happening. The housekeeper, Maria, a kind older woman with eyes full of stories, started slipping me little notes. "Keep your heart soft. Not all cages have bars. You are more than what they think you are." One day, I asked her, "Why are you helping me?" She smiled and said, "Because I've seen girls like you before, and I know how this ends. Unless you choose to write your own ending." That stuck with me. Even though I was trapped in that mansion with no freedom, no mother, and no love, I started secretly writing letters to myself. Letters of strength, of hope. Sometimes I'd sneak down at night, sit on the kitchen floor with Maria, and we'd eat cookies she wasn't supposed to give me. "You're too skinny," she'd say with a wink. "Can't parade a skeleton at the next charity ball, can we?" I'd laugh. For the first time in weeks, it was small, but it was something, and in that strange prison, I found the tiniest pieces of joy, hidden in crumbs. Notes. Quiet kindness. But, deep down, I still wanted to scream. Why did my mother give me away? What kind of debt could be worth her own child? And what happens if I stop being useful to these people? The answers would come, but not in the way I expected. He watched the trees sway outside the window, so close yet untouchable. The days felt like a loop. Same meals, same rooms, same haunting silence. It wasn't a home. It was a cage with throw pillows. One night, he found the door to the basement. Unlocked, his heart pounded like it hadn't in years. He crept out quietly, barefoot every step, a prayer. Outside, the wind kissed his face. Freedom. Until the headlights hit him. It was his brother, standing in the driveway, holding a leash, smiling. "You thought I wouldn't see the camera alert?" He laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was the laugh of someone who'd been planning this for a long time. The punishment wasn't loud. No yelling, no hitting, just silence. The next morning, all the windows were screwed shut. The doors had new locks. His phone disappeared. So did his books. Even the clock was gone. He started talking to the toaster, called it Dave, when his brother caught him laughing at Dave's jokes. He said, "I see the loneliness is finally working." For the first time, he felt something darker than fear. He felt erased. But then one night, he found something. Under his bed, a photo, old, faded, of their mother, smiling and holding a baby. But the handwriting on the back wasn't hers. It was his own. And that's when everything started to unravel. Time passed strangely in that house. Days melted into weeks. Seasons came and went, but inside everything stayed the same. He stopped counting the years, stopped hoping for holidays. Even his birthday became just Tuesday, but somewhere far away, someone remembered. Every year, on the same date, a bouquet of wildflowers arrived at the front gate. Always anonymous. Always the same kind his mother used to pick. He never saw who left them, but he knew it was her. The girl, the one who cried when they were torn apart, the one who screamed his name in that courtroom. She hadn't forgotten, and he hadn't stopped hoping some nights. He imagined her face, older now, maybe married, maybe not. Still searching for him, still believing he was out there, and she was right. He was out there, just trapped in here one morning while scrubbing dishes. He whispered to the faucet, "Maybe this is the year she finds me." The faucet didn't answer, but hope did, because that year the flowers came with a note, just 3 words, scribbled in shaky handwriting. Still looking. Always. He pressed it to his chest like a lifeline, and for the first time in years he cried without shame. Somewhere out there, someone still loved him, still believed in him, still saw him. And if you've ever believed in second chances, if you've ever waited for a sign that love endures, maybe this is yours. Don't forget to subscribe so you can come back later, or catch other stories that speak to your heart. You never know which one might feel a little too real. It happened on a Tuesday, ordinary as any other, until it wasn't. He was scrubbing the hallway floor when he heard it. A knock, not at the front door, but the back, the one no one ever used. He froze, heart pounding. The old woman never let visitors in ever. Then came a voice, soft, familiar, too familiar. Is anyone there? I think I know someone inside. He scrambled to his feet. The mop clattered to the floor. That voice. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't a dream. It was her. She'd found him before he could open his mouth. The woman, the one who held him prisoner for years, appeared like a ghost in the hallway, and for the first time, he saw panic in her eyes. She hissed, "You'll say nothing. Do you hear me?" Nothing. But he didn't hear her anymore. All he heard was the creak of the door, the breathless gasp, the silence before the storm, and then, "Oh my God, it's you." She stood there, frozen, tears spilling down her face. Older, wiser, still wearing the same necklace he gave her as kids. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. So she ran past the old woman, straight into his arms. They stood like that for what felt like forever. No one said a word. They didn't have to, but the moment shattered like glass when the woman screamed, "You think you're taking him from me? You have no idea what I gave up for him." Her voice cracked like thunder. She was shaking, and then she said something no one expected. "He's not just some boy I took in. He's my son." The room went silent. Even the wind stopped to listen. He staggered back. "Her son." "No," he whispered. "That's not true. You're lying." But she wasn't done. "I didn't steal you. I saved you from your real mother. From the one standing right next to you." He looked at the girl, the woman who had searched for him all her life, and suddenly, nothing made sense anymore. Whose son was he? Who was telling the truth? And why did love feel like a trap? Late that night, after hours of sitting in silence, Abby leaned in and whispered, "I know how we can end this. ... For good." Emma looked up, her heart pounding. The years had carved lines into her face, but her spirit, though buried, was not broken. Abby had grown into a clever young woman, sharp from survival, observant from years of pretending. She had memorized the routine, the schedule of the man who kept them locked away, the sounds of his steps, even the weak spot in the old basement door that creaked when pressure was applied just right. She reached under the floorboard and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. It was an old photograph of Emma and Abby at the beach, before it all changed. "You kept this?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "Every day," Abby nodded. "I need to remember who we were, so I know what we're fighting to get back." But the plan wasn't just about escaping. It was about justice. They would wait for Friday, the only day he left the house, for hours without fail. Abby had overheard him talking on the phone weeks ago. He'd be meeting someone she suspected knew nothing about what he had done. The goal wasn't just freedom, it was to reveal the truth. Emma hesitated. "What if he finds out?" Abby replied quietly. "Then we survive, like we always have. But if we do nothing, we stay his prisoners forever." And so the two of them prepared. One would slip out through the vent shaft to the shed where he kept the keys. The other would stay behind to create a diversion if needed. Emma practiced each step in the dark, again and again, until her hands knew the way by heart. But what neither of them knew was he had started to grow suspicious. A camera had been hidden, recently installed. Their time was running out. Will they make it out before he finds out? Or is this plan the beginning of another nightmare? The courtroom smelled like old wood and cold coffee. Emma sat straight, hands folded in her lap, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the murmurs around her. Across the room, Doris, her mother, her betrayer, her judge, and her criminal, all in one. She looked smaller than Emma remembered. Gray hair perfectly styled, pearls around her neck. She looked like any ordinary grandmother. But Emma knew better. The judge entered. The whispers stopped. This was happening. The prosecution opened with a single, piercing sentence. "This is a case not of custody, not of neglect, but of a mother who sold her child to erase her own debt." The courtroom gasped. "But Doris?" She didn't flinch. Emma watched her carefully. No remorse, no tears, just that same icy control she had seen the day she was handed off. Like luggage. Then came the witnesses first. The housekeeper tearfully recalled how Emma arrived at the mansion with hollow eyes and no explanation. Then Henry, old frail but steady in his voice, he told the court how he'd overheard Doris planning the arrangement, how she'd laughed when she said, "One less mouth to feed." Emma thought she was ready, prepared, braced for anything, until the prosecution played the tape, a crackling, grainy recording, but clear enough, Doris's voice. "I didn't abandon her. I traded her. I had no choice. No one chooses debt over freedom. She was my ticket out." The silence that followed was unbearable, and finally, it was Emma's turn. She stood. Step 2, the witness stand felt heavier than the last. She looked at the jury, then at her mother, and spoke. "I'm not here because I want revenge. I'm here because I want the truth to matter. Because if a mother can sell her child and walk away like it was nothing, what does that say about us as a society?" Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "I loved her, even after everything. But love without protection is a lie, and silence is betrayal." When she stepped down, you could hear people crying. In the room, even the bailiff wiped his eyes, and for the first time, Doris looked shaken. Not sorry, not broken, but exposed. The jury returned after only 3 hours, guilty on all counts. As they read the verdict, Emma didn't smile. She didn't cry, she just whispered to herself, "I'm not her daughter anymore. I'm mine." The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Years of pain, secrets, and unanswered questions now hung in the air, waiting for justice. Emily sat quietly beside her lawyer, her hands trembling just slightly as the judge reviewed the final evidence. Across the room, Margaret, her mother, stood pale and still for the first time in her life. Emily saw a crack in the woman who had once sold her, and a glimmer of regret in her eyes. The prosecutor's voice echoed through the courtroom. Emily was kidnapped at the age of 6, sold under the pretense of debt. But the truth is, this was never about money. It was about cruelty and control. Gasps filled the room. People shook their heads in disbelief. And when Margaret was asked if she had anything to say in her defense, she simply whispered, "I thought she'd ruin my life. I didn't know she was my life." Too little, too late. The judge looked directly at Emily, then to Margaret, before delivering the verdict. "This court finds Margaret Hayes guilty on all counts, including human trafficking, child abuse, and fraud. She is sentenced to 20 years in federal prison." Emily didn't cry, she didn't smile, she just breathed. For the first time in 2 decades, she could finally breathe. As the courtroom emptied, a woman approached Emily quietly. "I'm with a support organization. If you ever need help, people to talk to, we're here." Emily looked at her, then nodded. Maybe healing wasn't a dream anymore. Outside, the sunlight felt warmer than she remembered. A breeze brushed her face, and in that moment, she didn't feel like a victim anymore. She felt like someone who had survived the worst, and finally was ready to live. Stories like Emily's aren't just rare, they're haunting. They remind us that sometimes the deepest betrayals come from those meant to love us the most. But they also remind us of something else, that the human spirit, though wounded, can still rise. Emily's journey from silence to justice is not just a tale of survival. It's a call to reflect on what family really means, and how strength is often found in the quietest of hearts. What would you have done if you were in her place? Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to protect you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and you never know who might be comforted by what you share. If this story touched something deep in you, there's more where this came from. We tell stories that speak to the soul of truth, pain, healing, and hope. So take a moment, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications, because some stories are worth not missing. And if you're ready for another powerful journey, watch the next video that just might change how you see everything. Until then, take care of your heart. You never know whose story it might help heal someday.